So, hello everyone, I'm back to finish this list, but this time Marcel is gracious enough to join me so that he can chastise me for all of my foolish decisions.
That's
So,
right. I've been doing it all day on Twitter, so here I am now joining your stream to do it with you directly.
well, this should be some fun. This is what my top 12 is looking like. These are pretty locked in. I could still shift them around depending on what's still there. Um, but what you might notice is there's not a lot of Bantam stuff in here. I personally like Bantam a lot, but I feel Del Rey was better with the novels,
Right.
just because I thought the writing style was better and the continuity I think was kept better by the time Del Rey got around to doing it.
May I make some other observations about your top 12?
Go for it.
A good cross section of expanding universe authors. You have Zahn, you have John Jackson Miller, Matt Stover, Troy
Mm,
Denny.
yep.
Uh, I mean, you don't have Steve Perry, but like Michael Reeves is kind of like Steve Perry. So, uh,
Hmm.
Paul S. Kemp, who doesn't get mentioned often enough, James S.A. Corey, the guys who wrote
Yeah.
Vance novels, and then of course James Luceno, and Joe Schreiber, I guess as well. But I sort of mentioned him last because he's not really on the same tier as the other authors, and of
Sure.
course Drew Karpyshyn, who I think wrote Fatal Alliance.
That was actually Sean Williams,
Oh,
but
was it Sean Williams? Okay, so
yeah.
Drew Karpyshyn wrote Annihilation, I think. Then
Yes, that's correct.
okay,
Sean
and
Williams, I actually didn't enjoy anything else that he wrote. Well, I guess the Force Unleashed novels were okay, but those aren't in here because I'm only doing stuff that's not adapted from a movie or a video game. I'm also not including the tales because they're basically just short story collections.
right. Did now correct me? Did Sean Williams co-write the Force Heretic trilogy?
He did, along with Shane
Shane
Dix was
Dix,
his
yeah.
name. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I'm not a huge Sean Williams fan either. I will say of your list, I'm interested to know before you move on why Star by Star is number one, and why it's not Traitor.
Uh, so actually, Star by Star is the first novel I read that moved me to tears while reading it, and I thought that's powerful. That words written on a page were poignant enough to trigger such an emotional reaction. And
Yeah,
I've read it 4 times in full, and every time I had the same reaction. Each reread going, it won't get me this time, and it got me every time.
yeah,
To me, that's timeless writing. I also was a huge Young Jedi Knights fan, and
yeah.
so for all of the Young Jedi Knights characters to come back in this, that was a treat. It sets up Dark Nest, which I do like Dark Nest, with the Raynar going off into nowhere. I felt the story was really good. For the New Jedi Order, it felt like the climax of the Yuzon Vong beating down the Jedi, which was a very hopeless time. And I enjoyed that era of the Vong War where all hope seemed lost because it wasn't something we'd seen from Star Wars before. Just such unbearable, unsurmountable odds against the heroes, and this felt like um, the ending of that era of the Vong War, if that makes sense. Because then you have Traitor, sure, where Jason's being tortured, but after that it becomes more victories for the heroes, and I just enjoyed kind of the early stages of New Jedi Order more than the latter half.
Yeah. Star by Star is the most excited I've ever been for the release of a Star Wars book in my entire life, since before and since. I remember lining up outside a bookstore as a kid. I think I was like 12 or 13 at the time, waiting for Star by Star because everything I had read on the Force.net message boards promised that it was going to be, the best NJO novel yet. And frankly, for me, I know people out there have their issues with it, but it didn't disappoint. I thought it was really, really good. It's definitely in my top 10 list. It might even be in my top 5 list.
That's awesome that you have that memory of that. Like other people were queuing up for Harry Potter books, but you were there for Star by Star.
That's right, actually, at around the same time too, because I remember at around that time people were, lining up for Order of the Phoenix or Goblet of Fire, and I was like, no, give me my Star by Star.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Now, I was going to say about Joe Schreiber, there's connections in Mall Lockdown. Um, with Red Harvest and Death Troopers, he was just making um, books that would make a quick buck, the horror Star Wars gimmick, which I enjoyed, but there
Mhm.
wasn't a lot of substance to them. Now with Mall Lockdown, he was able to incorporate. These are spoilers, so turn away if you've not read it. He was able to incorporate Yuzan Vong appearing in it, and he was also able to reference events from the Dark Plagueis novel
Right.
throughout Mall Lockdown. So I think, given time and not being told to write the horror narrative over and over again, he could have created some connections because it was obvious that he cared enough to put some stuff in there.
Yeah. And I mean, for what it's worth, I don't know that Mall Lockdown would make my top 10 or my top 12 even, but I do appreciate those connections that he made, and I think that Joe Schreiber doesn't really get a lot of love, but he did something new with Star Wars, and people say, well, it doesn't really fit the genre, and I think it does. I think that Star Wars is one of those all-encompassing um, IPs that you can really fit, 7 or 8
Oh
different
yeah,
genres in. So I appreciate that he brought that to the expanded universe.
I mean, if you look at my top six, you've got a western, you've got an Ocean's 11, you've got an espionage kind of mystery thriller,
Yeah,
you've got this. I'm not sure how I describe this, but then you've got your horror down here,
yeah,
um, your more Star Trekky stuff down here.
that's right.
There's so much stuff that could fit into Star Wars.
I will say for Shadow Games, I absolutely love that novel. I thought when I was reading it, it felt like I was watching a film noir. It was just it like your classic kind of trope where you have, not to get into the plot too much, but you have, the former lover of like a mid-level crime boss, and she's
Mm-hmm.
just trying to break free and become legitimate, and he's not ready to let go and stuff like that. Of course, Dash Rendar gets pulled into it, and I thought it was just such a great novel.
Yeah, the whole time it was so visual that I felt like I was watching a movie unfold before me, and it
That's
was
exactly
gripping.
right. Yeah,
And um, I was personally a fan of Coruscant Nights, which was like the film noir genre, but this did it better, way
yeah,
better. And I liked Coruscant Nights. Um,
yeah.
Going down a bit,
Wait, before
there's
you move on from your top 12, just one last comment about Cross Current. I'm really happy to see that book on there. Cross Current, I think, is a very ambitious novel.
oh
Uh,
yeah,
I loved that it brought in, well, it has ties to the Lost Tribe of Sith, but
oh
it
yeah,
also it also brought in, the basically the stuff we had read about in Golden Age of the Sith, and I thought, in a
mm-hmm.
way that you wouldn't expect. So I was really happy to see that, and Paul S. Kemp, he writes a lot for or he wrote for the Forgotten Realms, which is a
Okay.
big fan of,
Mm-hmm.
and I just happen to think he's a really good writer. His prose is clean and easy to follow.
My third Star Wars novel was The Old Republic Deceived. And
Yeah,
while I had no clue what was going on because I was early into the EU, I'd read the Republic comics, I'd read Scourge, and I had started on Young Jedi Knights at the time. And then I read Old Republic Deceived. No idea what was going on, but it was thoroughly entertaining for me. He just wrote with such a visual style.
yeah,
And like not overly descriptive, but enough to where it flowed so fast that you were really invested. And Crosscurrent and Riptide, I felt were the best fitting names for what the books were.
yeah.
They were just so fast paced, and there were so many connections in there.
Oh, I
Um,
know.
and they're not talked about a lot. And there's some really ambitious things in there, like going back to that idea. This is a spoiler. Going back to that idea of cloning cloning Force users and going back to that well that was overutilized, but I felt this did it in a fresh way that was really interesting.
Yeah,
I felt it felt different enough to where I was really engaged in it, and then throw in time travel hijinks, and it was just something else. It was so different that it stands out, which is why I'm surprised no one ever talks about it.
I know. And I know we've talked about time travel in the past, but I think a lot of people find time travel less offensive if it's traveling forward in time,
Mm,
because traveling backwards in time, it creates the whole,
messes everything up. Yeah.
yeah, paradox and that kind of thing. But traveling forward in time, I think is a much cleaner way of doing it. I mean, arguably they did it again with I guess it's not really the same thing, but in Vector, Celeste Morn. I mean, she doesn't really travel forward in time,
Mm,
but for all intents and purposes, like the next time we see her is 4,000 years later, right? So it's
yeah, she's is she immortal, or is it just that she's in stasis for a lot of it?
I think she was in stasis for a lot of it, but I would expect that wearing the Moor talisman would probably extend her lifespan beyond that of a normal human being. So, especially a normal human being with force powers.
Yeah, that does make sense. I think it would be cool to have seen her pop up in a novel somewhere. There's some places that you could have done it for sure.
That's right. I agree. The only one on your top 12 that I'm kind of a little surprised about is Scoundrels.
Yeah, that's I talked about this with Alex on a stream literally yesterday, and I said that it was my favorite Zahn novel of all of them by far, actually. And he was flabbergasted by this, and he all he was able to say was that he was glad that I found something I enjoyed, but he disagreed like to the fullest extent. Uh, so
Yeah, I think I side with Alex on this one. But I mean, like some of the other novels on here, like you'll see in my top 10, you'll probably see Cross Current there. You'll see Shadow Games. You'll see Traitor and Star by Star.
mm,
You'll see Darth Plagueis. So I mean, not too far off.
would you have some X-wing books up there? Because I know you're a fan.
Yeah, I the Krytos Trap has really moved up the ranks for me
Mm,
in terms of the X-wing novels, but I really love the Aaron Alston novels, and I won't really have a clear view of how I rank them all until I reread Wraith Squadron and the books that follow later this year, because I just like the last time I read them was, you have to understand, 20 years ago, right? So it's going to be
yeah.
a different experience for me reading them as an adult. Like that's why when I read the Krytos Trap as a kid, I thought it was completely boring. I was like, I don't understand, I don't care about any of this
Mm.
stupid stuff. But now reading it, after having gone to law school and lived life a little bit more, I appreciated it so much more. So
See, so I read all of the X-wing books in 2019, which, as a younger person, that's a long time for me. And what I remember of the X-wing series was that I didn't think they were bad. I didn't think they were especially good, but I remember thinking positively of them, positively enough that every time one of them would pop up in New Jedi Order, I would be like ecstatic to see them. I'd be like, "Ah,
yeah.
here they are," and I'd be excited about that. So that was favorable enough. But I was about to say to you, is it offensive that I preferred the Alston ones from what I remember to the Stackpole ones?
Not at all. I mean, when I was so I would have read them probably around the same age that you read them. If we're going back to 2019, I very much preferred the Alston ones to the Stackpole ones. I didn't really like the Stackpole ones. Now, well, I guess I shouldn't say I didn't really like them, but I, I wasn't crazy about them. I still appreciated them, but I wasn't crazy about them. And now reading them as an adult, I have enjoyed all. So I'm on. I haven't started the Back to War yet, on my rereads,
Mm-hmm.
but I've read the first three and I enjoyed every single one of them. So mad props to Mike Stackpole, because I think he wrote some really great books. I don't think I was old enough to appreciate them at the time. Um, but Alston just has a way of writing that just makes you laugh and really engages you, and I think
Mm.
they're easier to love. Let's just put it that way.
And I think Michael Stackpole's fantastic as well. The Dark Forces duology are fantastic New Jedi Order
Yeah.
novels
Oh,
because
I know.
because Vector Prime I thought was good. Don't get me wrong, but when you go and read Dark Tide One, which I prefer Dark Tide One Onslaught to Dark Tide Two Ruin by quite a bit, but Dark Tide One, the cover was so ugly and boring. I was expecting it to be not good at all. I was judging the book by its cover,
That's right.
and as soon as I got into it, I was just swept up in such a short novel. But by the end of it, it ended with a little like cliffhanger, if I remember correctly, and I was left like really wanting more because I only had Vector Prime and Dark Tide One at the start. It took me 2 months more to get to Dark Tide Three, and that was the most agonizing weeks of my life, waiting to see how the storylines would resolve. because if I remember correctly, it was left somewhat open ended. The ending of Dark Tide 1.
That's right. I'm a little surprised. Also, I really love that book, but to see Hero's Trial on your top 12. What's the reasoning behind that?
I Chewbacca's death was it stung in Vector Prime, but it really stung when Han Solo was left without Chewbacca, and this was to me this was the first time he was going on adventures again, and Chewbacca wasn't there. It just felt so out of the ordinary. It felt so different. But this may sound blasphemous, but the Rin, his name was Droma. He was one of my favorite characters in the early New Jedi Order. And
Yeah,
since he got such a small role in Balance Point and a tiny mention in, I think it was Enemy Lines, he gets a tiny mention, but and he really never pops up again. He was fantastic. I loved everything about him. He really filled the void for me, and he just worked so well with Han to me. It worked really well, and I really liked the story of Hero's Trial. The second one, I just felt there was a bit of a drop off. It felt less Han and Droma focused than the first one was, and that's why I loved uh, the first part of Agents of Chaos.
yeah, that's. I agree with all that. I remember back in the day on the message boards, people were very offended by Droma. They thought it was Del Rey's cheap attempt to try and replace Chewie, and of course Chewie's a beloved legacy character, so how dare
Sure,
you try and replace him? But I think Droma served an important purpose in both those books, and
he
um,
helped Han get over his grief.
yeah, and I think history is on his side. Like the way we look back at those books, I
Mm.
think even the staunchest Droma uh, detractors will admit that yeah, narratively he served a pretty good purpose in those novels. So
Can you hear that? My dog's making noise.
but I cannot.
Okay. Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay. Yeah, he's moving around. Um, Old Republic Fatal Alliance to me was a story I wasn't expecting. See, because I'd heard from people that it was really dry, and everything about it felt really different and unique. The droids were really cool, and someone was it you who someone said that the droids were very similar to someone in the Instagram group chat made a connection that I'd never thought of before. Did they compare the droids in Fatal Alliance to uh, Vufi Ra, or who were they comparing it to? Just a second. Let me think
Maybe
about
that
it.
was Titus. I don't think it was me.
Well, someone was making a connection that I'd never thought of to some droids further down the line that I'd never thought of that added more weight to it. But since most of the characters in it we'd never seen before, it felt like there were more stakes to it than the other Old Republic novels because like their characters, you know that they're not going to just take a character from the games and kill them in the tie-in novel. But since these characters were really new for the novel itself, it felt like more things could happen, and it felt more imaginative to me. And it was really such a ragtag bunch that they brought together. So many, like there was a lizard who was a Mandalorian warrior in this one. There was a kind of generic but Sith Master Sith Apprentice duo that was kind of interesting. There was the Jedi, there was a Republic trooper, there was a Imperial like spy. Um, and saying that out loud, it sounds generic, but for some reason, it sounds kind of generic. But when it fit together, it really, really worked for me.
Yeah,
It
I don't
just
have.
so different.
Yeah, I don't have like a great memory of Fatal Alliance. Uh, I know I've read it because I bought it new. I recall I have a specific memory of that, and my book is creased to hell. So I definitely have read it. Um, but I'm kind of holding off on rereading some of the old Republic books at this point because I want to replay KOTOR 1 and 2 before I.
Right. Now, me and Titus share the opinion that KOTOR 2 is better than KOTOR. What do you remember of that, or will you have to see on the replay?
I think that the argument could be made that KOTOR 2 does a much better job of pushing the boundaries of the Force,
Mm,
our understanding of it,
sure.
and I guess what Star Wars means. And I think that if you make that argument, the argument could also be made that it's the better of the two games.
Right. If there's more meaning to the greater mythos.
Yeah. However, I don't know where I stand yet. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what you say because I just bought Knights of the Old Republic limited run games for the Nintendo Switch like a year ago, and it
Finally came.
finally is arrived because those just take forever. But I'm gonna be replaying that, and I'm interested to see how I feel about KOTOR because the last one of the two I played was KOTOR 2 on an iPhone, and I found the iPhone versions of the games were decent. They were good enough for me. So I'm going to be interested to see because the last one I played was KOTOR 2. So how will KOTOR stack up against that? Because
Yeah.
I didn't finish KOTOR 2 too many months ago. So it'll be kind of a comparison in reverse order. But moving down a bit, this is what I have from the rest of the teams and into the top 24. Now, some of the Legacy of the Force books are really hard to determine rating on because it's splitting hairs, because it's all the same story. And remove one, and all of the pieces and the meaning falls apart. But to me, it's moments that stand out
That's
in
right.
them, or just characters that they focus more on in that I felt was more essential, or events that were the biggest to the story. And that it's really splitting hairs, and you're really trying your best to remember what happened in which one because it all kind of blends together when you're reading them all back to back to back.
Yeah.
But and that can be said with New Jedi Order as well. Except I think New Jedi Order each novel stood apart more than with Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi's.
Right.
They were more unique, more different.
I'll tell you what's not surprising to see up here this high. Edge of Victory 1 Conquest is an incredible novel, so I'm not surprised at all. Yoda Dark Rendezvous is also a great novel, so again, not surprised. Sacrifice, Legacy of the Force, and I agree with you. Like Fate of the Jedi suffers from the same issue. It's like you have to sort of separate it from them, like based on the moments that you have, that you remember from them. Sacrifice, I think, is one of the best Legacy of the Force novels. I would personally rank maybe Sacrifice first, and then Apocalypse would be up there for me as well. And then, of course, the Darth Bane novels and Riptide. Those I'm not surprised at all to see this high. What I am somewhat surprised to see this high, I'm going to say, is Tatooine Ghost.
Okay.
Yeah, and The Last Jedi. Let's talk about those two.
I feel like these four right here in a row are ones that could have an argument made that they're too high. But I love all of these. First of all, Tatooine Ghost. It was the last Denning book that I read, and I was going into it hearing that it was his weakest, and it had fewer connections, and there were connections in it, but they were fewer and farther between. I felt that this was a refreshing story with pretty low stakes given what was all going on.
Right.
It felt refreshing and just um, there were so many moments that made me think. Like there was this scene where Leia fills a bath with water on Tatooine, which is like a huge luxury. It's little things like that that I wouldn't have thought about. Running a bath on Tatooine is like for the wealthiest of wealthy people.
Yeah, you got to read Dune.
Yeah, yeah. I read Dune a long, long time ago.
Okay, yeah.
But
Same
yeah,
idea.
yeah, same idea. But it made me think because Tatooine was always depicted as water being scarce, but I'd never thought of something like that before, which sounds silly, but I just never had in it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's other things in it that I really enjoyed, specific scenes. Everything with Han Solo in this was really good. I think that Denning is second only to Lucino for how well they wrote Han.
Right.
Because Lucino wrote Han amazing for me. Second is Denning, and third would be A.C. Crispin. Four would be Daly. Um, So the two people who wrote the Han Solo tri- the two Han Solo trilogies we got, I actually think Denning and Lucino did a better job with writing the character. I felt in Tatooine Ghost, it felt like Han was a very natural progression of where he would have ended up in where he was in his life post Return of the Jedi. And Leia's written really, really excellently in this one as well. And the whole thing of Leia trying to uncover some of her family's past here, which will later be expanded upon in Dark Nest. It's interesting how it's starting to set up those seeds for what will happen later on, kind of, if that makes sense.
Right. It's actually kind of interesting from a historical perspective. It's like, well, why didn't Luke and Leia find out more about their mother in all those Bantam years, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my own life, in my in the real world, I recently found something out about my father who passed away a long time ago, but I recently found out something about my father, sort of like 15, 16 years after the fact, and that kind of got me thinking back to the whole Luke and Leia finding out about Padme and Dark Nest, right?
Mm, yeah,
Um, and I was like, well, I guess it does happen that people can go years and years without maybe even really thinking about it, and then um, they uncover a new piece of information or something like that, right? So I thought it was really cool uh, to kind of go back and think about that a bit, and maybe something that I thought seemed a little far fetched at first, but now reflecting on it, I'm okay with it. I think
right.
it works in the expanded universe. So yeah,
Um, yeah, that's very interesting. I had just taken it as they were so busy, they didn't have time. But I guess with like the HoloNet and all of that, you would think that they would have found something, even with the Imperials wiping lots of stuff. You'd think they'd have had time to find stuff out. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Finding stuff out about relatives long after the fact of them departing us. I,
just
I, I still find out new stuff about my grandparents all the time, and heard sto- I would sit for hours and listen to them tell stories to me, and
of
I
course.
still hear new things. You know.
And sometimes it's just too painful for people. And I mean, Leia and Han had some very eventful years in between. Uh, Dark Nest and Tatooine Ghost. I think that it's probably like a almost a 25-year time span in between those two books,
Mm,
maybe less 20-year time span or so. And
they
they were
lost they lost a child. You know.
right, right. So I mean, I really don't. I don't see as much an issue with it as I did when I was a kid, and
Mm,
even then I knew the real life reason was because Lucas hadn't wrote the prequels when the Bantam
yeah.
books were being written, so we just didn't know.
With the Last Jedi, here, not to be confused with what would be Dead Last, the 2017 film. Is that when it came out? No, 2018.
I don't know. I try not to think about it.
Yeah, you wiped it from your memory banks.
Yeah.
That would be a good call. Um, this novel had some poignant moments off of Coruscant Nights. I was very invested in Jax Pavin and Laurent Tarak, and
Yeah.
interested because they had differing views of the Jedi and what they were supposed to be. And so over the course of the story, due to circumstances, they're forced to work together over and over and over again, and gradually a relationship begins to form. And I found that very interesting because they never really agreed on their views of the Force. Her being a gray Paladin who believed lightsabers were too much attachment for a Jedi, even, and then um, and that they needed to be more open to the weapons that they used, which was an interesting concept to explore. But then the Last Jedi kind of flips all of that they were building on its head, with the fallout from uh, a, something happening that leaves Jax kind of reeling throughout this novel, and by the end of it, was setting up something really exciting in my opinion, because Jax is looking at this Dathomirian as a potential Jedi candidate, and he's looking at this Spacer as a potential Jedi candidate. He knows both of them have the Force, and they're interested in learning what he has to teach, and so it was setting up him like running some. I couldn't believe he got away from Vader by the end of this one, because I knew for sure he was dead. He survives this novel, and unfortunately, we never got to see where that was going. But it seemed he was going to start up his own little Jedi Order, and I like to think that if it had continued, they would have taken a Jedi like Dash Jenner from Dark Times
Yeah.
and incorporated him into it. Maybe
Yep.
Quinlan Voss, maybe even Zayo or Kakruk. Yeah, because it's very interesting to think about where that could have gone. Him creating a new Jedi Academy between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, because even though Kakruk was teaching younglings at this time, there's no one really teaching adults. And this to me is reminiscent of Luke's new Jedi Order. They don't care about the age of the student. Jax has already decided that due to how tough these times have been, he's willing to change um, the Jedi's views on things and try to start up the Jedi again. So I was very interested in all of that going on. Not to mention Den Dur and I-5 throughout the entire Coruscant Night series, and then into here were just such a great dynamic comedy duo returning from MedStar, and IQ from even further back from that. Um, and just, I really enjoyed this one. And I know that a lot of people didn't like Coruscant Nights, they found it dull. I think it was well written, but like I said earlier, I think Shadow Games did the genre they were going for better.
Yeah.
The idea of a private investigator as a Jedi was amazing at the start, and then it turned into kind of a more typical Jedi on the Run story by the fourth one. But I still enjoyed the Jedi on the Run story better than the Private Eye Jedi story that I was excited for, which, like, sometimes returning to the normal formula can be a good thing. And I thought it worked really well. Well enough for me to put it as my 16th favorite Star Wars novel. I've read it twice, but that one might be due for a reread at some point.
Yeah.
What did you think of Coruscant Nights?
They're sort of middle of the road for me. I don't love them. I do want to find out what happens to Jax Pavan. The three books, so not Last Jedi, because I remember that one pretty well, but the other three books kind of blend a bit together.
Yeah, because there's Aurra Sing 1 minute, and then there's Vader, and then there's the Inquisitor, and they're all kind of mixed around into what order they appear.
Yeah. So, yeah, they probably wouldn't be too high on my list, but I was curious to know about The Last Jedi specifically because I've heard sort of both sides, both views. People saying that they like the book or they love the book, and then also people saying that they just thought it was the weakest of the Coruscant Nights series.
I think it makes sense that it would be the most divisive because it kind of departed from what the Coruscant Nights trilogy had been and took it in a new tone and direction, if that makes sense, but with the same characters. So for the people who didn't like Coruscant Nights, they probably would have enjoyed The Last Jedi. But for people who enjoyed Coruscant Nights, they probably wouldn't have enjoyed Last Jedi because it kind of, there's a tone switch up, I think, between them.
Right.
That's at least the sense I got with it. And you've read The Last Jedi?
Yeah.
And it stood out a bit more, or did you not like it as much?
I thought, again, it did stand out a bit more. Middle of the road for me, though.
Okay.
It's on my list.
Millennium Falcon's up here in Death Troopers. If I feel like if you like one of Joe Schreiber's Star Wars novels, you'll like them all. A lot of people crap on Red Harvest, and I really liked Red Harvest. It was my second favorite of the bunch.
I liked it too. I like both Death Troopers and Red Harvest. Actually read Red Harvest first, which I don't think you're supposed to do, but I did because it canonically came first, and
Right.
I thought both of them were fun reads. They're shorter books. I think they're one of the
Hmm.
shorter books that that the EU has to offer, and I don't know. I just feel like if you don't like Death Troopers and Red Harvest, that's fine, but you should appreciate their place in the EU. I think they push the boundaries of what the
Sure.
expanded universe could do. So I guess you could argue Galaxy of Fear did it first, but
Mm.
I thought Red Harvest and Death Troopers were a bit more adult focused.
And I personally think that Crosscurrent picked up some of the uh, elements. Crosscurrent's pretty gruesome.
That's right.
It's kind of more in the vein of these
Yeah.
Death Troopers and Red Harvest, but I read them back to back. I read
Yeah.
them in the span of a week. Death Troopers and Red Harvest. I just ate them up. I just excuse me. I enjoyed them a lot. They were just kind of fast, no substance reads. Millennium Falcon here. I really enjoyed it. Now the plot that's not Han Solo and what's her name? Uh, Jason's daughter slipped my mind.
Oh, Alana.
Alana, thank you.
They call her Amelia.
Yes, yes. Part of her guise to protect her. The stuff that's Han and Alana in this is the reason why it's so high. I think that they present Han here as such a good grandfather, and
Yeah.
it's really nice to see. Because after all that's happened, uh, he could have been so bitter and resenting and returned to how he was, but a big part of the Agents of Chaos stuff was him choosing his family over his grief. And then instead of that being a good resolution for him, he got kicked in the teeth again and again, 2 times additionally, and but he stuck with his family. And here you see how he not only stuck with his family, but he strived to be uh, above expectations for his family, and he does so much for Alana in this one, just to facilitate some fun, to get her mind off of all the troublesome things that have happened in the galaxy. It's kind of a refreshing light throwback to Bantam era stuff for me.
Yeah.
And some of the earlier stuff in the book, I didn't care about. I just loved every part, every sentence that was Han and Alana's part of the story.
Yeah.
And some of the other stuff was okay or forgettable or whatever it was. But I believe there was a connection in here to Coruscant Knights in Millennium Falcon, if I remember correctly. There was a rebel group mentioned in one of the prequel, not prequel, but one of the flashback parts of it. And I think that rebel group was in Coruscant Knights as well. I could be totally wrong.
Okay, I must have glossed over that. I don't recall. Maybe it was the fact that I didn't make the connection because I think I read Millennium Falcon first
Okay.
before I read Last Jedi or the Coruscant Knights books.
What were your thoughts on Millennium Falcon? I just found it super refreshing for the era.
I mean, it's not my favorite James Luceno book, but it's James Luceno, so it's going to be probably closer to the high end of my list. I would say maybe not in like the third row, but it would be on the higher end of my list for sure.
Well, Alex is here, or he was. Uh, never responded, so maybe he left. But yeah, I can see that. I just really love the Han Alana dynamic so much that it just skyrocketed. Now, I don't think I realized this until I was sitting down and making this list, but lots of things with Han, just like I would never have said Han is one of my favorite characters.
Right.
But looking at this, there certainly seems to be a correlation between Han and my favorite
Yeah.
Star Wars novels.
Yeah.
The EU really wrote him so well, though, in my opinion.
I agree.
Going down, I think we already covered some of this. You mentioned that all of this would be sort of up there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about Path of Destruction that I'll mention is I really don't like how there is that minor contradiction between
That
the
and Jedi
events.
versus Sith.
That's right, in Jedi versus
Right.
Sith. and Path of Destruction, because I mean Drew had all of that at his disposal. I mean he had to have, because he was adapting it, and
Yeah.
the contradiction didn't have to occur, and he allowed it to occur. And I'm a big Drew Karpyshyn fan.
Yeah, I've liked everything he's written.
I'm reading his newest book right now, Time Kings of Las Vegas. I don't even think it's out yet, but I kickstarted it, so I got a advanced ebook copy, and it's like really engaging. It's such an easy read, and that's
Right.
Drew Karpyshyn's I think he's a good author. Also, he's Canadian, so there's that.
Mm,
But I don't appreciate when there doesn't need to be a continuity error, and the creator makes one anyways because they want to preserve their vision of something. It's like
hmm
you're working within a shared universe, play nice. Like Dave Filoni does this a lot, and I don't appreciate it. But like,
hmm
anyways, that's all I'll say about Path of Destruction. But otherwise, like that novel is incredible. So
Yeah, and from the beginning, you know it's going to be incredible because he makes mining seem interesting. The mining scene at the beginning just instantly reeled me in, where Bane's a miner at the time at the beginning, and just even that seems so uninteresting and lackluster. But he made it interesting. So from the get go, you're thinking if this is enjoyable, them fighting over picking spots to mine, what's the rest of this series going to be like? You know?
right.
Um,
Minor correction to something I said earlier in the stream. I think I said apocalypse when I was talking about Legacy of the Force novels.
oh,
I meant to say, because I was in relation to Sacrifice and sort of where it would rank. I meant to say Revelation. I was thinking of like
okay.
last book in both series, and Apocalypse just sort of floated top of mind. But Revelation really just hit me in the feels with the way every single chapter started. I thought that was
Mm,
such a great narrative device, such a great narrative device, and you know, I think there's a lot of Troy Denning haters out there, but what he did in Revelation, I thought was just such a great way of tying the expanding universe together.
with the Young Jedi Knights connection.
Oh yeah.
You said Revelation. I think you meant Invincible.
Oh God. Yeah. Thank you. Revelation's the one that comes right before it.
Yes, correct.
Is Revelation? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the one with Centerpoint Station?
Oh goodness gracious. I think Center Point Station is in Fury, the one before
Is
it.
Fury? Okay. Yeah. See,
I
they all
think.
kind of Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi all tend to blend together for me.
Yeah, for me as well.
So it's
Uh,
not Revelation that I meant. It's actually Invincible. Thank you for correcting me.
of course, please correct me as soon as I make an error because it's bound to happen.
Now this is interesting. You ranked Balance Point higher than Destiny's Way.
So going into New Jedi Order, I read a lot of reviews online for it, and everyone said that Balance Point was the most dry one of all.
Right.
So many negative comments that I considered skipping it altogether at one point because
Last
I didn't own it, and I was thinking maybe I'll just move on to Edge of Victory because I believe Edge of Victory is after Balance Point directly after. Is it? Let me check my shelves. I don't. Yeah, Edge of Victory is directly after Balance Point. So
Yeah.
I had Edge of Victory, and I was considering just skipping Balance Point altogether and coming back to it at some point because I heard it wasn't good, all of that. And although Jason's characterization in this did annoy me, um, this one felt really gritty and down to earth. Um, and all of the New Jedi Order ones do to a point, but this one really stayed in one location for most of it. If memory serves, most of it was in one location, and when they make a book set in one location, which is a Star Wars book, because Star Wars is this grand galactic. You've got a galaxy, so many planets to explore. When you only stick on one and develop it so much, and you enjoy it, and it's really interesting, it can be really special to me. Like Trader. Trader is mostly just not even just on one planet. Most of the start of it is just in one room. Um, and it's most of it just stays on one planet. I think all of it except for a ship coming into Coruscant.
Right.
And so when you can do that with one location and develop it so much, and Kathy Tyer's writing style, I really liked it, um, especially here. I like the truce. That I always said Bakura, but a lot of people say Bakura, so maybe I was pronouncing it wrong. But
I say Bakura.
Bakura, okay, that's what I say. Because
Um,
I've heard some people say ba, like enunciating the ba part of it, kara.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I've heard that too.
okay, just caught up on these messages. It's too busy talking, blabbering away. When I get blabbering, it's a continuous stream.
Now,
Feel free to interrupt.
the other thing that I wanted to ask about was Omen versus Apocalypse. Personally, I thought Omen. Okay, so I should tell you of the books that I have. There's a bunch of prequel novels that I haven't read yet, but go ahead and spoil. I mean, I know everything that happens in every novel, anyways. So, and I have not yet read the second half of Fate of the Jedi. I've only read the first four, uh,
Okay,
but I also know everything that happens in them. But
right.
recall reading Omen, and I didn't think it was that good. Uh,
Okay.
I don't care for the Lost Tribe of the Sith. I might if they were pure-blooded Sith. If that would have been much more interesting.
That would have been a lot more interesting. I've got to say.
And I know that there was a contingent of pure-blooded Sith at one point, but they all
Yeah, they got
they died
killed
out.
off. Yeah.
Right, or they got slaughtered. That's right.
Yeah, it was genocide from the Queen, right?
Yeah.
And
So
these are some spoilers. I should watch my mouth a little.
yeah, 5,000-year-old spoilers, but I'm curious to sort of get a sense of why Omen ranks so high on your list, especially I think is the first Fate of the Jedi novel that we've come across. So
Correct. So I went into all of Fate of the Jedi with a negative opinion on Vistara Kai.
right,
I got this from nowhere. I just knew I was gonna hate her because a Sith for Ben, and I was hearing that, and I was like, that's not gonna fly with me. I'm not gonna be happy with that. I went in with such a negative mind. I also went in with a negative mind for Christy Golden. I was like, who is this cheap? And I'm not a Karen Travis fan particularly, but Karen Travis leaves, and they just find her and throw her in there to write some novels. And I'm like, could you not have brought Stover back, or just literally anyone but some new random person? So I went in expecting not to like Christy Golden, expecting not to like Vistara, and I came out at the end of the novel, which was really short. And by the end of it, I was thinking, I wish this one had been as long as Outcast. Outcast, the first one, I believe.
yeah,
Is that correct? I was thinking, I wish, because Omen's pretty small comparatively to the others.
it is. Yeah, it's a small. It's the smallest. I think it's the smallest book in the Fate of the
In the
Jedi.
Fate of the Jedi, yeah, that sounds about right. I came out of it thinking, I wish Omen was as long as Outcast, and Outcast had only been as long as Omen.
Right.
And I liked Outcast a lot because Outcast is right down here. The Corrin stuff with his family is amazing. But I found that I'd never particularly liked Lost Tribe of the Sith. I liked the first Lost Tribe of the Sith story, and then the others kind of were just kind of okay. I mean, you had some interesting stuff like the Jedi Covenant member coming in there towards the end, and the comics was somewhat interesting, showing that some aliens had crash landed there, the Spiral comic. But other than that, I really had no interest. And this was the first time that I thought they could really be interesting in this era. They're literally out of time, and here they are trying to rule the galaxy again, and they're completely out of time, and they have come from a society where they were held as gods for so many years. They're arrogant, but they're willing to learn, in their attempts to conquest of the galaxy again,
Right.
which I felt that they were interesting for the first time, really, in this era. And I was really surprised because I was never overly fond of Lost Tribe. I was expecting to hate Vistara and Christy Golden's writing. I came out enjoying all of it by the end of it. So that's why it really stuck out. And Apocalypse is just the perfect climactic culmination of the entire series. And I do think Fate of the Jedi is weaker than New Jedi Order and Legacy of the Force and Dark Nest as a whole. Now, Dark Nest is further down, but uh, um, all of Dark Nest is above 5 of the Fate of the Jedi books in my list because I do think Fate of the Jedi is the weakest of all of those novel series. But
Right.
Apocalypse was still a great culmination of everything that was built towards. And there was a little cameo towards the end there with a certain spiky Sith Lord from Legacy Comics. So that was awesome.
Of the 4 Fated Jedi books I've read, Abyss is my favorite. That scene where Luke and Ben are in the lake of or they go to the lake of apparition,
Yes, that's why this one's high for me as well.
um, was just so good. I really loved that scene, and the people that they spoke to there. Um,
Ben, this is a spoiler for all of those concerned. Ben meeting Anakin for the first time. If that was Anakin, and I fully believe that was their
I
spirits,
do.
because some people I talked to said no, that was just visions of that were created by Abeloth to distort. And I was like, where are you pulling that from? I fully believe that was all of the spirits of the departed. Ben meeting Anakin and telling him that he was still the greatest Jedi uh, that Luke had trained. Um, that bit got me kind of choked up thinking about if Lucas had let Anakin be the focus of New Jedi Order, where it would have gone.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, we never got to see Anakin's characterization fulfilled. But it it got, I'll admit, it got me a little emotional to see Anakin and Jason again. And it caught me off guard too. And Mara, this is full spoilers, but Anakin, Jason, and Mara all of there just so good. And Jason saying that he didn't regret killing Mara and he'd do it again.
Yeah. Just
That
double
was
down.
so cold and so awesome.
But
Yeah.
that's why I do think that it was their actual spirits or force manifestations as opposed to like a deception or something else, because they were all very in character, and there's no, if it were something that was created by Abeloth, there's no reason for her to have Anakin or Luke's wife say all those sweet things to them, right? Like there's just
Hmm.
no reason for it. And Jason doubling down was just so great. I was so happy that they did that, because I was like, oh no, they're gonna get him to apologize or he's gonna regret
Hmm.
what he did, and then Legacy of the Force is gonna be kind of cheapened, and he's like, no, I'd do it again.
Yeah, yeah. It was so cold. And the entire conversation there was so captivating.
Right. And it makes
So
you question,
captivating.
like, did Jason have a point? Like, I don't
Hmm.
know. It made me kind of pause for a second.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He talks about the visions of Alana being dark side
That's right.
in this, correct?
He sees,
And
I think he sees someone on a throne in
and
his.
that was great, I believe.
Yeah,
Um,
they don't
no,
say who it is, but
but it was a vision of Darth Krayt corrupting Alana.
yeah,
I really wonder what would have happened after Crucible. Like, where did Anya Solo from Legacy 2 come from? Because like maybe not necessarily did she come from Alana. Like if Alana goes dark, Alana could have gone dark. Who knows? The first daughter in the Skywalker, the only female in the Skywalker family to have gone dark, uh, potentially, if the vision was to have been fulfilled. because it does make you think maybe he had a point. He was just trying to protect his daughter,
Right.
which is why he is far superior to Kylo Ren, and anyone who says otherwise should have a CAT scan.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I as a father to a daughter, I understand his motivations, and I would completely go to the dark side to protect my daughter if that's what it took. So,
I mean, that's somewhat comforting, I suppose.
wow. Okay, we have our first Bantam novels, I think.
Yes. Do you want to say something or
I think that the Dark Nest trilogy is very middle of the road for me.
okay?
Um, I have not yet read Crucible because I'm waiting to finish. Um,
X-wing.
yeah, and also the Fate of the Jedi before I read
Right.
Crucible. It wouldn't make sense to read it without. Uh, I love The Last Command and Dark Force Rising. I love the Thrawn trilogy. I don't think
Hmm.
that's a controversial statement. I think a lot of people do, but um,
I do think they're a bit overrated.
I do too. They're high for me, but they're probably around the same place that you put them on your list. What 41, 42. So I would say like I think that's still high on the list. Um, that's probably where they are for me as well. I would put Heir to the Empire up with them.
Okay.
Otherwise, I mean, like I don't know. I think I loved Bloodlines. I thought that was a fantastic novel. Karen Travis did a really great job of making me care about Boba Fett, and I really before I read Bloodlines, so uh, that was great. Vector Prime is a classic novel. I am kind of ambivalent towards Revan. I know I sporting the name Revanchist and have a Revan avatar and all the things that I use, but
A
it's
lot
me.
of Revan fans I know don't like the Revan novel.
Yeah, I'm not. I wouldn't even call myself a Revan fan. I just like the way Revan looks, and I like what
Mm.
he, I guess what they stand for, what he stands for, and I like uh, the concept of Revan, the idea of Revan, but like Revan as a person in the world, which the Revan novel focuses on. I thought I found myself much more interested at the Scourge parts of that novel than I did at the Revan parts.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that, and I happen to agree with you.
When Scourge goes to, I think the planet's called Nathema or something like that, and he finds out Vitiate's origins.
Yeah,
I thought I that was the most interesting part of the book to me.
that was super cool, and you know that it's not a good thing when you're, I suppose, when the Revan titled novel, you'd have rather heard it had it titled Scourge and spent most of the time with him. Um, but the, the parts of the novels that were with him were exceptional, but I also liked the rest of it fine. Um,
Yeah, like I'm ambivalent towards it. I didn't dislike it. I think Revan is probably on the higher end of the middle for me. Like if I had to, you know, middle of the road for me, like I said, very much like the Dark Nest stuff, and I forgot what I said earlier was middle of the road. Probably the Coruscant Nights books as well, but Revan's I would put above those.
okay.
So, yeah,
The reason Jedi Twilight's the highest I have is there was a bit in this that makes you think about the scale of Coruscant.
yeah,
The Inquisitors are trying to hunt down Jax Pavin,
I remember. Yeah,
and there's a bit where they say that there's like several million human Jax Pavins on Coruscant. That's not counting alien Jax Pavins. That's also only counting the male Jax Pavins, suggesting there could have been female Jax Pavins.
that's wild.
And that's only on Coruscant. Like that makes you think about the scale. Like and that there to me makes it more poignant what the Vong do when they sack spoil. I mean, this is all spoilers, but when they sack Coruscant, the Vong, it just makes you realize I don't think New Jedi Order really established how much loss of life there was in Coruscant. It
Yeah,
like alluded to the fact that who knew how many, but there were I'm convinced that there were way more people who were killed than ever suggested
Yeah.
by J. Herrera, just based on this little reference here to millions of human male Jack's taverns on Coruscant alone. Like that's just crazy. That blew my mind. Just a simple little thing like that.
Complete devastation. All
Moving again.
right. There we go. I was waiting for it. Dark Tide 2
Yeah, I personally think Dark Tide One
is
is
better. Yeah, that's
better
fair.
than Dark Tide Two. I think Dark Tide One is up.
I just really
Yeah,
like the end of Dark Tide 2. The battle I thought was
yeah,
really
that's a cool part.
okay. Let's see here. Scourge, interesting. I enjoyed that book. Razor's Edge. Um, yeah, like it's the same as Scoundrels for me. Like these books, Razor's Edge, Scoundrels, they were kind of written close to the end.
Yeah,
Um,
I felt that Martha Wells. I heard that she didn't even have a name for the book. Matt Wilkins said that she wrote the novel without titling it Razor's Edge. So she turned the novel over to Lucasfilm and said, "You'd figure out a name for it," which is mind blowing. But that's not on topic. I think that Martha Wells really wrote a young Leia well,
right.
and it was the best written young iteration of Leia that I'd seen, and I really felt in her shoes throughout it, which I think is what the author was trying to establish, and they established it really well. The story was a good little adventure as well, and and Scourge here for me is somewhat sentimental. It was my first EU novel, which no, I didn't have a clue what was going on and where Mander Zuma came from and who Luke's new Jedi Order was. I mean, I just watched Last Jedi and Rey was the Last Jedi, and now who's this guy before I figured out about the EU and all of that in 2017, 2018, around there. Um, but my late grandmother bought this for me. She bought the first Star Wars book that I now I have over 600, and she bought my first Star Wars book, and it's somewhat sentimental, but I also think it's quite underrated. It was actually based off of some source material that Jeff Grubb wrote for Wizards of the Coast, which I don't think a lot of people realize.
Well, me being a big D&D fan, like Jeff Grubb is a name that I know very well. So um, that's really cool how he took his, RPG source material and kind of spun into a full-fledged story. I love hearing stuff like that. Jeff Grubb also wrote for Magic the Gathering. He wrote some of the, I think he wrote
Okay.
some no, I shouldn't say novelizations because they're not novelizations, but like the companion novels, because like Magic the Gathering, each card set, like they have like a story, like an in-universe story that goes along with it. And so, I like Jeff Grubb's work. Um, so I like Scourge. But I'm also happy to see Paradise Snare on here because when I read the AC Crispin books, I had read them after I read the Han Solo trilogy by Brian Daley,
Hmm.
and I just felt like there were like we never really hear about the Han Solo trilogy from Daley. Like all these other EU books
Mm,
don't really reference it all that much, and then you have AC Crispin that just fits it all in.
yeah,
She was like a master at continuity.
it's really a shame that they never asked her to come back and do any other
Yeah,
Star Wars novels like Del Rey
but
should have
her
done.
Han Solo trilogy is a huge highlight for me.
And her name's Bria Theron, correct?
Bria Theron is, yeah, she's the love interest.
Yes. She was so like as soon as I found out young Han was getting a love interest pre Leia, I was like, this is going to be a serious love interest throughout this, and I'm not okay with him having a serious love interest before Leia. But the way that it was written was like by the end of it, I was thinking, man, I wish Han and Bria had been together. You know,
Yeah,
we don't need Leia. That just shows you the power of how well AC wrote it to make you care about that when you know it's not going to work the entire time you're reading it. Work out
I know.
for. Han, and the way that she was able to still make you care for it.
It's like every time I watch Revenge of the Sith, I just wish Anakin will not turn to the dark side.
Mm, mm. that my 6-year-old cousin may be a maniac. It's his favorite. His favorite character is Anakin, but Revenge of the Sith is his favorite of the Star Wars movies. Still trying to wrap my head around that one.
Oh, look, we got some people in the comments.
Yes, I see. I see the Thrawn trilogy hater himself.
Hello, Blue Pig.
And Alex is enthusiastic to see a Thrawn trilogy hater. And then they're just conversing. So, thank you for watching, Blue Pig, even if you have an opinion I don't agree with.
Outbound, like this entire show, I agree with.
I wouldn't say they're top, but they're all excellent, just really solid.
100%. Yeah, I enjoyed all these novels. When I first read Outbound Flight, I was a little surprised to see that Joris Savaoth, which I think is that's how they pronounce
Yeah.
it in the video books, was nearly as unhinged as his clone counterpart.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that at all.
And have you read the Episode 1 Adventure Young Readers novels?
No, I haven't. Mainly because
They're hard to find.
Of access. Yeah, so
I was able, I was able to get 12 of them for $50, which was a deal I am so glad I didn't pass on. Because I was thinking, do I pass on it? And when I read them, there are so much connections in these. To me, these are essential for you fans. But do you mind a spoiler regarding them?
Please spoil it all. I probably know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Joris has a cameo in it.
Yeah.
And it's mentioned that I think Outbound Flight was actually mentioned in the Episode 1 adventure itself.
That's so good.
In his, 2 bits of dialogue, he already seems a little off the rails, which was just awesome that I think Ryder Wyndham put that in there.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Props to him.
Yeah.
Well, I still wish we could have seen a Ryder Wyndham full-fledged Star Wars novel.
Yeah, me too. When I was on Matt Wilkins' one of his live streams with Dylan, we were talking about who we'd like to see of those of like the Ryder Wyndhams or the Jonathan Whitmans, like a full-fledged adult novel. Jude Watson. I said Abel Pena, I think was my answer.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. He wrote Skywalkers. That was pretty decent in length, right?
And a whole bunch of articles just
yeah.
expanding on the EU, like he and making connections. Blue Pig says that he thinks Outbound Flight is better than the Thrawn trilogy. Well, I mean, Pig, you'll be happy to know that Quinlan has Outbound Flight ranked higher than Heir to the Empire.
I do. I actually think Dark Force Rising and The Last Command, Heir to the Empire sets it up, but I think that Dark Force Rising and The Last Command are more compelling stories. Sure, they wouldn't have been without Heir to the Empire, but Heir to the Empire to me isn't as compelling as the other ones.
Pig says subbed.
Oh, thank you.
I was gonna say about Legacy of the Force. I see Tempest down there. I really like that novel. A lot of people don't like it apparently, but I thought the focus on Tenel Ka and apes. I really liked it. So I don't know. What do you think of that?
So you may notice that it's the second lowest ranked Legacy of the Force for me.
I did notice that.
I am a Troy Denning fan all the way. I'm a huge Tenel Ka fan back to Young Jedi Knights. She is top 3 favorite female Star Wars character for me, and top 10 favorite Star Wars character for me.
What are the other two? Jaina and Mara Jade.
Mara is one, and just a second, what's her name? No, it's not Jaina. It's Zana.
Oh wow,
I almost said Rain.
from Darth Vader. Okay, yeah, Rain was her pre-Zana uh, identity. Okay,
Yes,
yeah,
and Jane is awesome. Like, if Hollywood wants to write the strong female characters that they want to write, just look at Jaina. She checks all the boxes. She is amazing. Um, she's arguably the best female character there, but I just um, in terms of just overall arc, but I just liked Mara Tenolka and Zana. I can't. I keep running to say Rain, and it sounds wrong. And Zana are my three. What about if you had to pick three?
I say Mara
And
Jade. I know you said Mara Jade a couple times.
yeah, I say Mara. I've
Uh,
always said that.
okay, I'm just gonna say Mara, but I know that I mean the same person that you do.
Yes.
Mara Jade.
Now I'm pretty sure I'm wrong because it's pronounced Mara in the Jedi Knight 2 Mysteries of the Sith game. I think it's pronounced Mara in that.
Yeah, I sometimes listen to the Mark Thompson audiobooks, and I think
Okay.
Mara Jade. So Mara, Jaina, and if I had to pick a third, ooh, Nomi Sunrider, hands down.
Yes. Luckily, I've never had to speak face to face with Noah before, because he would probably try to shred me apart. I need my big brother Alex there to help me out, from Big Scary Noah. But yeah,
Yeah,
he
Noah
definitely
seeing
would
Star by Star as your top novel would yes, he would
have a panic attack.
take issue.
Um, yeah, I think that's a good list that you had there too. Um, moving down, there's some Fate of the
Oh,
Jedi stuff.
good choice. Backlash. Backlash should be so much lower on your list.
Yeah,
But I'm glad it's your
Backlash
last.
was my bottom Fate of the Jedi.
I just read that, and this is why I took a break from Fate of the Jedi, and even though it's my first time through, and started rereading the X-Wing novels, is because
You needed your faith in Alston restored.
well, yes, that too. I didn't even think about that, but I think that's probably this subconscious reasoning behind it. But Backlash, I thought, was just such a misguided novel, and just killed the momentum of the series for me.
The thing about it was really dull in my opinion, really slow,
Yeah,
and it seemed like it was moving away from the objective, um,
yeah,
and getting weighted down in subplots that it didn't need to. And having Ben Skywalker on the front, I was so excited, and then it turned out to be really disappointing, uh, in my opinion. But and in yours too, apparently.
uh,
So
let's see here. Rebel Dawn, Hutt
I
Gambit.
love I
Yep.
love the end to Rebel Dawn. Uh, it could probably move up a space, but I'd try to keep the series in sort of blocks, but that would probably jump that.
Yeah, fair enough. Darth Maul Shadowhunter, I actually quite like the ending of that book. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone,
Yeah.
but it just it plays out so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I am surprised because now we're getting into the daily Han Solo books. I don't see the Lando books yet.
I'm not sure where the Lando books are actually. There they are.
Okay, I'm glad that they're
Because you were a big fan of them. There was one little thing in the Lando books that took me out of it a little, I'm afraid. That being that they called transparisteel glass And
Right.
then there was also a mention to plastic, and they called a hololift an elevator. Now I get this is early in the EU stuff, but now that tape took me out of it just a little bit.
Well, he
And
also makes
Lando's,
mention to dinosaurs too, which I thought was funny.
I don't remember that. That's interesting. Which one was that? And
Mind Harp, because I just read
the
it.
Mind Harp. Okay.
Yeah, there was some throwaway comment about how, they're older than, you know, the dinosaurs or something like that.
Oh man, I don't remember that. It's been a little while. I've been meaning to reread them. I actually have my copy is the UK edition of these books, and they're all split off like the American ones, but they're really light, and so I don't want to damage them. So I recently got the one where they're collected all together because I want to reread them.
Oh, Planet of Twilight. This. I think this is the first time I actually will chastise you. What is that doing even anywhere near this high on this list?
Uh, as funny as it sounds, I like everything about Beldorian. Um, who is the Hut who appears in this? Um, I'm afraid I like him, and I thought the concept was cool.
That's I can't even say that's fair because I don't agree with you. But I actually think the concept of Beldorian is cool as well. But I don't. Beldorian does not a good novel make. Is what I'll say.
That might that's very fair. Um, but it was the best of the Callista trilogy in my opinion. And I'm gonna imagine you're gonna say Dark Saber was the best.
I am, and
Okay.
I strongly believe that. I
I
think
actually thought Dark Saber was a little bit dull.
yeah. I mean, that's fair. You'll hear Lance talk about Darksaber's importance to the overall expanding universe because it's really like the first time, or it's really the last time we see the Empire in full force until
Mm,
the ceasefire years and years later. So
yeah, and what I'm curious to hear your take on these Republic Commando books
I haven't
because
read them yet.
okay, because
Remember, I
they're
said I haven't read a whole bunch of. So I haven't read Siege and Stealth. I haven't read Labyrinth of
okay,
Evil. I haven't read the four Republic Commando books or the Imperial Commando book.
okay,
And I have not read. They're all sitting on my shelf to be read, so I own them now. And I have not read the MedStar books
okay,
or No Prisoners and Wild Space.
okay. So No Prisoners was quite high on my list just
Yep.
because continuity in it was amazing, and the dialogue was really witty and quick and snappy and just quite humorous and just a lot of fun to me, which I wasn't expecting. I mean, the cover is just two TCW clone troopers firing, and the contents are just so EU. It's wonderful. But for Republic Commando, the first Republic Commando was awesome. From
That's
there,
great. I also think that there's this unofficial uh, audiobook on YouTube, and a lot of people talk about it all the time. But this guy did it with his son, I think, and it has like sound effects,
oh
and
cool.
yeah, I'll try and track it down and send it to you. But I heard it's quite good. It sort of made the rounds around Twitter. People talk about it quite a lot. So
And is it, what's that of Republic Commando?
yeah, the first one I believe
Okay,
hard
nice.
contact. The first one, it's about
Yeah,
yeah, it's that one.
Hard Contact was amazing. It's called Republic Commando, and that was the one that focused on the Republic commandos and their squadron. From there, it got muddied down in trying to establish lots of lore about the Mandalorians because Karen had this infatuation with Mandalorians. And sure, it's somewhat relevant, but she was just it felt like she was jamming all this lore down my throat. Um, and I just wished it would go back to focusing on the Republic commandos themselves more than like Cal Scarada, who became a main player in the later ones. And
Right.
unlike Matt Wilkins, I kind of like the Jedi Clone Trooper romance. I feel like I'm surprised it didn't happen more often than it did in the EU because they would have been close, the Jedi generals, and the Jedi generals would have felt isolated. And even with your codes, these are unprecedented times. And and when you're fighting together on a battlefield, saving each other over and over again, mission after mission, I think feelings could blossom from that. So I'm surprised it didn't happen as often. It didn't take me out of it the way it seemed to take Matt out of it. But there's a good connection in Imperial Commando 501st. There's Tal Isbeth and Wang Dung. Esther Hazy from Yoda Dark Rendezvous shows up. Her nickname was Scout, so that's why this one gets above these ones. But the Cal Scrata stuff and all of these just took me out of it a bit.
Right. Alex has some interesting comments here in the.
I mean, fair enough. He's cool. I didn't like how he treated what's her name, the Jedi who was in it. Okay, that's interesting. Is that's the stuff that was less interesting to me. I preferred it to be focused on the core Republic Commando Squadron themselves. And when the game squadron came into it, I was even okay with them. That still, I would have preferred it to be on the first squadron rather than the game squadron coming in. But see, the Mando stuff, I just.
And yeah, I know Alex doesn't like Siege and Stealth. He said it earlier before. I actually found them the other day, actually, for the first time, and I got them both used, nearly in condition for like $5 each.
Oh wow, that's really good. Is that Legends or original non-Legends banner?
Non-Legends banner. I wouldn't have. I probably purchased them. Yeah.
Man, that is so awesome. On eBay right now, they're going. I just checked the other day. They're going for like 30, 40 because I don't have those yet.
Ooh, so I'm saying $5 Canadian. So like 30, 40 for me is like 50, 60.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. 30, $40 is what it was going for the non-Legends banner, and the Legends banner was going for like 10 to 15 last time I checked.
Unfortunately, I do have some books with the Legends banners. All my Fate of the Jedi books have Legends banners on them, and some of like here and there books, like I think my Shadow Games has a Legends banner on it.
Yeah, some of them are hard to find without Legends banners. Like some of them don't even have non-Legends banners, like Dawn of the Jedi and Razor's Edge.
Dawn of the Jedi. It's really funny actually. I ordered Knight Errant off of Amazon like a few months ago, and it came without the Legends banner, and I was like,
oh nice. So it's got the comic insert, right?
Yeah, and
I love that.
Yeah, and it was really funny because the first thought I had to myself was, I guess no one has purchased Knight Errant since Disney, and that's why they still have like non-Legends banner stock of it, in an Amazon warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, and the book is so dull. So when you get to the little comic bit in the middle, you're like, oh, finally, this is finally something that changed things up. And then the comic is dull as all get out as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone else in the chat.
Sievert.
I actually kind of liked Travis's work in Legacy of the Force.
Me too.
It did feel very jammed in, but I found myself feeling disappointed when it would cut away from Boba Fett and his story back to the main story, which I wasn't expecting to have felt.
That's why, like, Karen Travis made me care about Boba. I always liked, his action figure as a kid. I liked his armor. I thought he was cool, but I never really fell for the whole Boba Fett's the greatest ever until I read Legacy of the Force, and I'm like, I actually care about Boba Fett now. And I talked about this a lot before. Karen Travis does care about Boba Fett as a character.
Alex has tattled on me.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble now.
It's okay. We've already talked about all the Denning stuff because it was so high on your list. So.
Well, it might be archived. Thanks, Alex, for watching my back as always. Here's the Lando stuff.
Yeah.
Down here, I talked about what took me out of it a little bit, but they're solid. Um, I wished kind of that the entire novels had just been him at a card table. You imagine a trilogy that was depicting like a week-long sabacc tournament. Because if you found the right author, that would have been amazing. Because anytime he was playing games in this, that was the best part. And
Yeah.
I think you were saying that you felt, was it you who we were in it? I was in a stream with you, and you were saying that the Lando books made the Falcon feel alive for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really good point. I felt that. Um, did you feel that the fall? And I meant to ask you in the stream, but there were so many people talking over each other, And did the Falcon feel alive to you in the Millennium Falcon novel as well?
I haven't. Let me see. I haven't really thought about that before. Uh, yes, but I read it so long ago that the comparison with, you know, Mind Harp, which I just read and is fresh in my mind, um, I'd have to compare. I wouldn't be able to compare the two. That's interesting. I'm gonna put a pin in that and actually think about that when I'm uh, rereading Millennium Falcon, which I will probably next year sometime.
Because the Millennium Falcon, I think the novel made it feel really lived in.
Yeah,
Made it feel more like a home than a spaceship. Um,
I mean it is right.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it is. Uh,
yeah.
and then I did like that Lando felt uncomfortable with the blaster, which it's ironic because all of the covers have him holding his huge blaster. I guess he became more comfortable with it as the series went on.
Yeah,
But the first novel made a point of how he didn't like it, you know?
for sure. Bounty
And
Hunter Wars, I think, would be on the bottom of Alex's list, but it's sort of near the middle of yours.
yeah, well, one of them is right up here. That's my favorite one of
Slave
them.
Ship. I think that's the first one, is it not?
That's the second one.
Hard Merchandise is the first one.
Hard merchant. The Mandalorian armor is the first one.
First
Hard
one, okay.
merchandise, the final one.
Final one, okay. Um, Death
So
Star is. I love that it exists, but I thought it was a very weak novel.
I wouldn't have said weak. It was just a giant retcon as a novel, so I'm glad that we had it. But I would just say it was kind of dull.
That's what. Yeah, fair enough. Dull. It was a dull novel. I mean, so is Cloak of Deception, but I read Cloak of Deception when I was a kid. So
Well,
I
Cloak of Deception is interesting because it takes so long to get to the story.
yeah,
Because since it was the first Star Wars novel at the time it was released, they go through explaining like common concepts. So as a seasoned Star Wars fan, by the time I'd gotten to it, I was wondering why they were explaining all the stuff I already knew back to me. Uh, uh, so deleting an email. Sorry.
so
I had
I'm
my
happy to see
notifications. Sorry. Go ahead.
Starfighters of Adamar as I think your first X-wing novel. I think it should be much higher on your list, but I think Starfighters of Adamar is the best X-wing novel ever written.
I'm really glad you agreed with me. I thought that might be controversial.
No, it. What I felt that way when I was a kid. I feel that way today.
I I felt it was the fastest paced and it was a good resolution to everything. I felt it was just a zippity pace, um, and it had really sad undertones because it was one of the last Bantam ones there. So everything around it makes me feel like it was the end of an era a bit,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. There's some more X-wing things here. I was still working on shuffling some of these around.
Wait, let's see what we got here. Wedge's Gamble, Kratos Trap.
I was trying. I was going to have put this one up to here,
Good choice.
and I was gonna put Iron Fist to below Hard Merchandise,
Good choice.
and I was gonna put this over this, this back to over Wedge's Gamble, and I was gonna push Solo Command to behind Kratos Trap, and Ice Sarge's Revenge would have been there. That's
Yeah.
where I was going.
I think that is rank them higher on my list, but the order that you put them in is probably identical to the order I would have ranked them in. Like order, forget about where they are on the list. The order you rank the X-Wing novels in is identical to mine. So,
except they would have been like 40 places higher.
probably because where are we 102? They probably would have been 40 to 50 places higher. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one's inside top 100. It's just so hard because there's so many different ones that I just love so much for a variety of different reasons. Like even down here, these are good books.
Yeah,
Like,
I love the Jedi Academy trilogy. What's Alex saying about PTSD, but I don't really know. Oh, Shatterpoint. Okay, yeah. Oh, if he hates Bounty Hunter Wars. Okay, I see what he's saying. Yeah, I love the Jedi Academy trilogy. They would probably be much higher on my list as well.
looks
Interestingly,
like there's some drama going that we've been missing.
oh yeah, I saw that comment.
I mean, am I a good guy? I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I didn't want you to have Legends banners, uh, so that's why.
Friends don't let friends have Legends banners.
That's one of the first rules of friendship. But I wasn't mad about it. But I heard that Alex hated Bounty Hunter Wars so much that he chucked the book that I'd given him against the wall.
It's actually a really funny video.
I think that's hilarious. It's out.
I don't know that it's
I
out
believe
yet.
it's
He
out.
sent like a preview clip of it
Oh, okay.
a
Well,
month and a half ago.
I can't wait to see that because I think it's so funny that he felt compelled to throw a book with how bad it was. The only time I've ever come close to that is probably Into the Void. With Knight Errant, it felt like it would be just a waste of energy to throw it. It doesn't even deserve it. It's just so forgettable.
Yeah,
It deserves to be put down and forgotten.
I don't know why people don't like Into the Void. I thought it was lower tier, but middle, like sort of lower tier, middle of the road for me. The Crystal Star, which we haven't gotten to yet on your list, would be much higher on my list as well. I adore that novel.
Okay, so I enjoy a lot of things about it. I enjoy the Cadre G. They were like these six-legged wolves who turned into people.
The four-legged, four-armed people. I meant to say.
Yeah. And six-legged wolves who turn into people. I enjoyed that way more than I should have.
What's crazy about that is that, like, yeah, you get that at the end of, sorry, spoilers, at the end of the novel, but then in Legacy, one of those six wolves gets, something happens to it, and the Kodru G with the four arms, they kind of freak out about it. It's like, oh, my son.
Yeah.
You're like, but you would only kind of get the significance of that if you had read Crystal Star.
It was Crate who carved that poor little thing up, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah, or it might not. I don't know if it was it Crate. I thought it was one of his henchmen. Anyways,
maybe it was. Crate was there.
Okay. I think this is good. What else you got?
Moving down. So I said this in the first stream I did where I was ranking them. There's still some stuff here that needs shuffled around because I wasn't completely done with this middle part. I was still considering stuff, but this was going up. This was going up to here behind Shadows of Mindor. Now, what I was saying about Shadows of Mindor was I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was unnecessary. A little bit unnecessary story-wise, which is why it wouldn't be higher. I mean, it's fine. Now, Heart of the Jedi. Love that we got it, but honestly, it's mid. Like, there's not really a lot to it. I mean, other than the novelty of holding something that wasn't released. New EU. Once that wears off a little bit, when I read my copy, I just sat down and was like, this felt unnecessary. I'm not surprised that they didn't end up releasing this. Now, I don't remember what it was, if it was just scheduling conflicts, or if it was because they didn't like the quality of the novel, or if they wanted to publish a different one in that slot. But I'm not surprised, because I don't think it was up to the quality of the Bantam era, but it was still fine. It was just kind of mid-tier for me.
Yeah, I don't think you're your opinion on that is controversial. I think a lot of people who've read Heart of the Jedi feel that way. We still appreciate that it came out and that we have it, and it was a new story to read. But I don't think anyone's beating down doors saying that it's the best thing that came out of the EU. So,
and that probably elevates it a little bit for some people.
also of the Jedi Academy trilogy, Jedi Search is absolutely the best of the three,
Yeah.
hands down.
No,
I don't even know that that's something that someone can
this was
argue.
a switch I was going to make, and I was going to
Thank
do
you.
something else.
That
I was going to put Centerpoint ahead of Jedi Academy.
The switch that you just made was what I was going to talk about, because I thought that Dark Apprentice was the weakest novel of the three. Uh,
Sometimes the second one just kind of is. It feels like it wasn't the introduction, it wasn't the conclusion.
yeah,
And the only time I didn't feel like that was with Dark Force Rising.
Dark Force Rising was really good. In my reread of the Jedi Academy trilogy, which I just did last month, I was surprised at how fast Exar Kun was dispatched in Champions of the Force.
Mm.
I don't recall that as a kid. I thought he was around for longer.
For long.
Basically, the second half of the novel is dealing with Dala and the Maw installation.
Right.
So yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the one where Dala gasses the majority of the moths, or is that later?
no, I think that's Dark Saber.
Okay. Because I can never remember when exactly that takes place.
Maybe Alex can throw in the chat. Was that Dark Saber, Alex, where she gasses the moths? I don't know.
Jokes about burning them.
When a German starts joking
No,
burning
yeah,
books,
that's
I
what
get nervous.
I was about to say.
Oh, sorry.
A German joking about burning books. Uh, oh, Alex shared this link to Noah's little Denning hate group, so he's gonna hear that.
All right, keep going. Let's see what else you got.
Yeah, sorry this is taking way longer than I could have envisioned, but it's a lot of fun. Thank you for sticking with me on this. You have some great opinions that I've been interested to hear. I think Salonia for me was better than Ambush at Corellia.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting because usually I like the first one and the third one, but not really the second one as much. The second one was okay, but the first one was really the third one, sorry, was really the standout.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear why the Hand of Thrawn duology is so low on your list.
Okay, so I felt that they were really, really well. They're quite thick books, and the scene at the end where Luke and Mara are gonna finally be happily ever after is nice, but it's the only thing that sticks out as being memorable to me about these two huge books. The first thought I have is, well, the first thought is, oh, there's Borsk, right? But then my thoughts instantly go back to, there's Borsk. He's the one who takes out Vong in New Jedi Order, so it's still not focused on his actions in the novels themselves. And then I think, that's the one where Mara and Luke are gonna be together finally, and all of the fans except Matt are gonna rejoice. And that's all that like stays memorable to me. It's been a while, yes, but I feel like they were really stretched out, which is weird because they could have made a trilogy, but this duology felt like it could have just been one book and they could have cut a lot for me. I just didn't enjoy them very much.
Yeah.
Alex agrees with me.
I agree too. I have my own reasons for ranking them low, but I think I'm interested to always hear why other people think the same. Rogue One as well is another book that I wasn't particularly fond of and really just read it because of the NJO
Yeah,
links.
it would have been nice if there was more to it, to the story wise. But there's Darth Plagueis ties into it, right? And
Right.
that makes it better. You know, Darth Plagueis just elevates the EU around it by referencing it. You know, but I felt that Greg Bear, his writing style was kind of dull.
Yeah.
Which
The Black Fleet Crisis, I disliked immensely when I was a kid. Reading them, I thought they were so dry. But I'm
they're
looking forward to rereading them.
okay. Yeah, I'm hoping to reread them soon. I'm just trying to finish a reread of some comics currently, but I really need to get back around to reading those because to me they were just really, really forgettable.
Yeah.
And when you have stuff like what's the really cool looking guy who's the one of the main villains of
No
the entire
Spar.
thing. Yes, you have him in it. He could have been so cool. Just he's visually cool. I think he could have been written cooler if that makes sense. He could have been written to be more maniacal than he ended up being.
Oh, for sure. Um,
Then
yeah, I don't.
Annihilation is all the way down here.
Yeah,
Luke
I mean,
Harbison.
when we get to the bottom of this list, I mean, I haven't read Siege and Stealth, but I trust Alex's opinion on them, and I
They're, I'm sorry, Alex, but they're not as bad as you say, but they're still not good.
yeah, like all of these books, I agree. I'm not a huge fan of them, except for the Crystal Star. Splinter the Mind's Eye I suffered through as a kid. The Approaching Storm I have read, and it was a snooze fest. Um, let's see what else. I Jedi. I probably think about it a bit more charitably than you guys do, but I don't hate it as much as Matt Wilkins or Lance does. But
I don't hate it like they do, but it just felt really. I mean, I really like Michael Stackpole, but it felt arrogant a little bit.
yeah, of course. But I got used to that arrogance. You know, you see that with Timothy Zahn a lot in
Mm-hmm.
his books. Why don't you talk a bit about Choices of One and Allegiance, and why are they so low on your list? Because they would be low on my list too, but I want to know why they're low on your list.
Choices of One was really felt like a waste of time. Uh, the story to me wasn't that compelling, and then there was this thing the entire time where Matt Wilkins talks about this, and I 100% agree with this opinion. He talks about how it's almost egotistical of Zahn because he's like, oh, look, I'm going to break continuity, I'm going to break continuity. Because he has not just Mara and Luke on the same planet, but like Mara running um, above Luke without them meeting because, you know, they have to meet later for continuity.
Right, and he's
He
like,
does,
"Oh, they didn't
he
see
does
each
the,
other."
oh, they almost,
Yeah,
they're so close. They know that someone else is there, but they're not sure who, you know, that.
yeah,
Like, I was like, is this supposed to be like exciting because we know what's going to happen, and if they do meet, we're going to riot. So you better hope that doesn't happen. And even then, if that doesn't happen, this is really dull.
right.
Um,
I think
and
Alex.
Allegiance was
Sorry,
really
go ahead.
dry too.
Finish your
Allegiance was
thought.
really dry too.
Yeah, Allegiance. I
He,
was gonna say Alex says in the comments that he'd rather watch the sequels again or the Bounty Hunter
oh my
Wars,
goodness,
and I think he's talking about Siege and Stealth. I think, but that's a pretty bold statement. Like you'd rather watch the
the
sequels.
sequels.
I don't know that I'd rather watch Rise of Skywalker over anything on this list. Um, she's on a balcony. They did. She literally talks to him. Oh, talking about Luke and Mara. Yeah,
And Choices of One, did they have a conversation? I don't remember that.
it's so dumb.
They did.
It's just can't, high up, so she can't see him, so that it's an excuse. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Allegiant, the stuff with the stormtroopers I thought was interesting, um, but not
Okay.
interesting enough for it to rank higher on my list.
I felt that Allegiance could have been a short story instead of a novel. That's
Yeah,
what I thought
agreed.
after I was done.
100%.
Galaxies, the Ruins of Dantooine, for me, well, really off-turning cover. This is a book that should be judged by its cover, because goodness gracious, looking at that, do you really want to flip that open and start reading something that looks like that?
No,
That
it
is
looks like
atrocious.
garbage. It looks like fan fiction.
It really does. It looks like something on like Wattpad or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but the first 3, 4 chapters of this, I was thinking, I have found a diamond in the rough. Why does no one talk about how good this is? There were some really cool ideas. There was this Imperial who was like a botanist, not a botanist. She was like a biologist, and I found all of these ideas fascinating. There was an Arthurian who was fascinating. There was this rogue character who was a little mysterious, and you were wondering about him. And then the last, um, well, I don't remember how many chapters were in it, but let's say that there's like probably 15 to 20 chapters. First three chapters, I was like, this is really good. And the last um, 10, I was like, this is gonna do well to be better than Knight Errant. It was just so bad. The last half of it, it just took so long to go anywhere. After the great setup that I felt there was, it just went nowhere,
Yeah.
and it was like a chore to try to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you read Galaxies?
Yeah. And I remember maybe like 0% of it. So all that sounds right to me, though, as I recall.
Wild Space. I saw in Matt Wilkins' reread that he actually enjoyed Wild Space the second time around.
Yeah.
Almost as much as No Prisoners, and I was just thinking, that's not the right opinion. I didn't like Wild Space. Here's Dark Saber.
Yeah. Of this row, the only thing that I would really change is I would have Dark Saber much higher on my list. I'd probably have the NJO books higher too, but these were absolutely the worst of the NJO.
For sure.
Cestus Deception.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I think you enjoyed Force Heretic. Because you keep like saying that parts of Force Heretic were good. My biggest problem with it is Danny Quee, who disappeared off the face of the galaxy, all of a sudden pops up and is important again. And when you have a novel that has Yuzan Vong and Sai Rook in it, and it's as dull and uninteresting as it is, like, you have a lot of problems happening. This could have been one novel instead of three, and it still wouldn't have been interesting. Was that what you felt? Like, you said it was the worst, but what what did you not like about it?
Oh, I thought it was completely dull. I didn't. I don't really like True Bakura. It would probably be closer to the end of my list. So the whole thing about the Sriruk.
I always said Sairuk, but I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Sriruk. I didn't really care to revisit them.
Okay.
I thought there were going to be much cooler mysteries revealed in the unknown regions, and it was just a huge letdown. But I don't remember which one it is. It might be Remnant. But one of the first, or it was the first reference to Kyle Katarn in something other than the novellas or the video games. So NJO had the very first reference to Kyle Katarn in an actual novel. And
how did you feel about Kyle Katarn later? Was there a reaction when spoilers? Kyle Katarn was stabbed through by Jason.
I knew he was going to survive that, so I was like, they ain't going to kill Kyle Katarn.
I was instantly like shock and rage and terror.
Yeah.
Because my favorite character had just killed my favorite character from the video games.
Yeah.
And I was just all like, oh no, they didn't just do that. And then like a couple paragraphs after he stabbed, you're like, oh, he's gonna live. Okay.
Yeah.
But I didn't remember that Kyle was mentioned in here.
Yeah.
Kyle should have been more prominent, but I mean, he did. It was nice that he showed up as often as he did in Fate of the Jedi and Legacy of the Force.
That's right. Yeah. I will say though, I know you didn't put the anthologies on here, but I really, really, really love Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina.
Okay, Tales from Jabba's Palace was my favorite, but Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina was my second favorite.
Yeah, Tales from Jabba's Palace I love too. Even like Tales from the Bounty Hunters, there was a bunch of stories that I loved in that. The only ones I didn't really care for.
Bounty Hunters was kind of hit or miss, in my opinion.
Which one?
Tales from the Bounty Hunters was.
That's right. It was more hit or miss. Yeah, I didn't really care for Tales from the New Republic or Tales from the Empire as much.
Those were mostly just reprints from the adventure journals, which I'd already read.
That's right. Yeah. But Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, there's one story in there, and I know I talk about it all the time, but I think it's called the Wolfman and the Lamprey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That
And
one is so out there, isn't it?
I that friggin' one story, I just think about it all the time. I don't know why. I mean, there's so many great stories in Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina. I think Alex was talking about the bartender story the other day, and
Yep.
that's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. There's the Momana Dawn story, right, where he's
Yeah.
in exile. He's been exiled.
Yep.
There's the Greedo Tom Veach story.
There's the
There's
one about the Jawa who just
That's right. I think that was
goes
Kevin J. Anderson.
crazy. Yeah, that one's good. And
Uh,
he buys it from one one that I think is underrated and not talked about enough is the story with the Renat
the
in it.
Renat. I think that was written by Rebecca Moesta. That
Yeah, and that's why it connected to the Jawa one because
right.
Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Moesta are well, their husband wife.
Yeah. There was also I think it was called like Mapping the Future or something like that. It was about the moisture farmers and the Tuscan Raiders.
Mm.
That was a great. Uh, that was a great short story as well. I really enjoyed when the Jawas are trying to figure out what wedding gifts to bring, and they can't figure it out, so they just end up bringing everything that was suggested.
Is that in the one about Figure and Dan at the wedding you said?
I think it's called like Mapping the Future or something like that. But there's a wedding uh, that occurs amongst like some of the moisture farmers, and the Jawas get invited to it, and they don't know what to bring. Because the Figure and Dan one is specifically the wedding of Lady Valerian, so it's a different wedding.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but I'm not sure why that's not ringing a bell. But that sounds amazing. Um,
Oh, it's not. That's not the title. Yeah, I don't.
well, no, I think Alex is referring to the one where the Goddle gets all like stabbed by the female. What's the that character's
I don't
name?
even remember her race, but I know exactly who you're talking about. And
Henemthi. Henemthi, I think.
Nightshade, is she a Nightshade?
Nightshade. Yes, Nightshade.
Yeah,
That's a pretty good one. Nice
yeah,
little twist.
that was good because he's such a scumbag. That Goddle.
He is. Yep. Yeah, it's Henemthi. Her name was I just looked it up. Mayum Oneth. Um, and yeah, the story that you mentioned, the Wolfman and the Lamprey with Laxivrak and Disibogen,
Yeah,
that's so good. It feels so like is what's happening actually happening or not because of the way it's written.
I like to think that it did happen that way.
I agree with that. That's how I like to think of it as well.
Let me see if I can find. Uh, I know. I'm sorry. I'm hijacking the stream for 1 second, so I can just read the end of it because it's so poignant. I have a screenshot on my phone. I know, Sivrak said, but there is no need to return there. There never was, she said. And then, tail and paw, their hearts and souls entwined forever, Dice led Sivrak through the forest of Endor's moon to a special place near an Ewok village, where three friends waited, as they had always waited, as they always would wait, for all who would join them, bound by the Force. And behind them in the forest, the music from the cantina softly faded and was never heard again. That's how the book ends. That's how the
Yeah,
anthology book ends. I cannot think of a better ending to a book I've ever read in my entire life than that. There probably is, but I can't think of one right now.
and
So satisfying.
leave it to the EU to take the wolf, the werewolf in the cantina who George
Right.
edited out. Leave the EU to take him and take that weird looking worm and make them so interesting, entertaining, and making the ending and conclusion of their story satisfying.
Yeah.
They sent you on a journey with the characters in one short story, which is
Right.
just the EU's beauty, you know?
I just think Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina and Tales from Jabba's Palace are really good examples of the EU at its best because it's like these are characters that appear for like a few seconds on screen,
Oh, yeah.
and we get their entire story. Like that's what the expanding universe is. That's what the point of the expanding universe is. I don't think Disney has done anything like that. not with really these side characters. I know they have the from certain point of view novels, but I think
Yeah.
the point of view novels really still a lot of this the stories in those novels still kind of lean on the legacy characters, the OT characters, and they're kind of
Yeah.
scared to take leaps. Not
They
all of them.
can't make, unlike the EU, they can't make background characters as interesting as the EU could.
Right, right. I remember reading about all these characters in um, the Essential Guide to Characters when I owned it as a kid, and uh, it wasn't until later on that I actually read about their stories in the anthologies, and I'm like, these guys are so interesting.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I agree with the last three books on your list. Uh, Knight Errant and Dawn of the Jedi are very low for me. Like I said, I'm a little more charitable towards Dawn of the Jedi than you guys are. I think probably the Barbara Hamley books would be near the end for me, but
Children of the Jedi and Planet of Twilight.
yeah, I think so. I think
The
Children is better than Planet for
the
me.
only reason I put Planet of the Twilight so high is just the novelty of a Hutt Jedi. I know that you said a good novel it doesn't make, but I just enjoyed it so much.
I was actually reading Baldorian's article today, and this notion that he like uses the Force to keep himself fit. I thought it
Mm,
was hilarious because someone asked a question on Twitter about Jedi diets, and I was looking through the Jedi Path book, and it doesn't say anything about diets. I mean, how could it? They're all different alien races, so there wouldn't be any strict
hmm
diet. But one of the three pillars of the Jedi Order is self discipline. So that's why we don't see any large
Yeah.
overweight Jedi.
hmm
And uh, Beldorian was no exception.
That just made me think of another unique aspect to Crosscurrent and Riptide. It feels like many moons ago that we were talking about the uniqueness. But when you said about how you never see overweight Jedi, there was the Jedi Master who got caught traveling through time. His Padawan died. The Padawan was that species um, who collected all the body fat. One of Jabba's dancers was that species. I can't remember the species, but the Padawan was a member of that species, and he
Right.
was described as being a chubby Jedi, and that just seems so out of the ordinary. It
I
described
mean,
like the smile on his chubby cheeks.
yeah,
Was
I'll
the
forgive it because
description.
he's a Padawan, so I'll
Yeah.
forgive it. But I just think that I'm not trying to fat shame or anything like that, but like we don't really see any overweight Jedi in either the movies or the expanded universe. At least not that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are probably
Yeah.
some examples people could pull out and be like, "Look, you're wrong, you idiot." But yeah, I don't recall seeing it. I think it's because you know the Jedi are ascetics. They're monks.
hmm
You know they take physical exercise as serious as mental exercises. So I just think that like I said, Beldorian would be no exception to that either.
And Alex says that Dawn of the Jedi sucks, and he says that there's nice
Nice world.
world building in it.
That's it. I really liked the concept of qua infinity gates. I know it's like
Yeah.
Stargate; it's kind of
hmm
the same issue, but like
hmm
even Star Trek has like these gates that you can step through, and
Right. Yep.
I like that idea a lot, and I welcomed it into Star Wars, especially in like ancient Star Wars.
hmm
Uh,
And it was also in the Clone Wars secret missions. Have you read those young readers novels
yeah,
about the Chiss
I
Jedi?
haven't read them, but I'm familiar with that. Um, I guess the issue with Dawn of the Jedi is it doesn't really tell us anything about that. There is some world building, but it doesn't really tell us anything that we couldn't have learned from the comics,
hmm
and so it's
And
kind of like a nothing novel.
and I really like the comics.
Yeah, and yeah, it was Star.
And that's an unpopular opinion. I like the comics.
I do too. I just think it wasn't
They
Austrian.
were
It
Yeah, it
wasn't
wasn't his best.
it wasn't his best at all, and it might have been his worst actually, but it was still good. But it wasn't.
I would argue Agent of the Empire was his worst
Oh yeah,
comic
okay,
series.
yeah, that's right. I forgot about it, but that was only like 15 issues. Agent of the Empire.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess Dawn of the Jedi wasn't that much longer.
It was rushed. It was rushed. I would have liked to see it fleshed out a bit more. I think it was getting better. Like Prisoner of Bogan was uh, a lot better than Force Storm, but then Force War just rushed it all.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
I agree.
but yeah, what you said about it being a nothing novel is so true. And even the world building, I was taken out of it a bit by the fact that it had two different time periods telling a story.
That's right.
Like it was two different books mixed matched together, and it took me out of both of the stories the way it jumped between them.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't think it's the worst. I think Matt Wilkins does. Clearly, you do as well. But I do think that it's the more that I think about it now, that's probably it keeps like sinking on my list. So we'll see where it ends up when all's said and done. I'll do one of these. I'm not going to do a live stream, but I'll put together one of these and send it to you.
That would be awesome.
Probably in like a year from now when I'm actually finished my rereads and my final reads of some of these books. So
The sad thing is you have to add each one individually by searching it into the bar.
well, I mean, you know what? I am no slave to hard work. So
I mean, yeah, that's just me complaining because would have just liked them all to be there. But thank you for coming on and discussing these with me, and I can't wait to see your list in
yeah,
a year and a half or so. That
thanks
would
for
be
having
great.
me. It was a pleasure, and
Well,
I
thank
think
you for coming on.
2 a.m. for both of us, so I think we should
Yeah,
probably go to bed.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
It dragged out, but that's just the beauty of the expanded universe. It makes you think, and there's so many things that can be said about it.
yeah.
You know,
I think Matt tells a story about how him and Dylan had like a 13-hour car ride, and they just spoke about the EU the entire time, and like, nothing about. My wife would think that was completely insane, but nothing of that surprises me. I could probably do the exact same if I were, in a car with you or Alex or something like that. So
that would be amazing. It's still a dream of mine to have an EU con some year. Just everyone in the EU community just come on down to someplace. It would be amazing.
maybe. I mean, I never say never. Smaller cons have been put on, so I think that there would be quite a market for this. I would totally come to America for that.
Oh yeah, and Callum Johns. Are you aware of him? He's
Yeah,
Australian.
yeah. You told me about. I know Alex. I've interacted with him a bit on Twitter before.
Okay. He's kind of he. I might be wrong, but he kind of got into it via the games and then got into the EU as a whole. And he said that he would come to America for an EU con, but like it would have to be paid for. Like it's a long flight and expensive. He's on the other side of the world, but
Oh, I'd pay my own way. I don't care. I've just come to meet people and sort of be part of that celebration.
it would be awesome. We'd have Matt on a giant pedestal, and uh, since he's the king of the EU circles, and we'd have Alex with a Sheev shirt walking around.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't see a king of the EU circles. At best I'll see Matt Wilkins and Chris Nelson as like the dual consuls of Rome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, there you go. And Christopher Nelson. I don't
Never
worry.
forgotten Chris.
I love Chris. He's amazing.
Chris is amazing because he's so like I'm looking for the right word. He's so chill and laid back.
Yeah.
About everything, but then he's so excited at the same time.
I know
He's awesome.
I can only aspire to his levels of zen when it comes to this kind of stuff. So
Yeah, how does he not get like he must get angry like we do about the EU being gone, but he just seems so okay with it and laid back. But I don't know how he could be, but
Lance, I wouldn't.
Matt, Christopher, and Lance.
I love Lance.
I don't know about that one. What if Dylan's probably above Lance?
Yeah. Ryan Kinnell, maybe.
Yeah, Spencer from the Star Wars library.
People like that. I don't know. Anyways, there's OG. She's up there.
She's great. Yeah, so the big Star Wars EU channels.
Yeah.
Thank you for sticking around, Alex, in the comments, and thank you for staying up extremely late, Marcel. And And let me know how work goes tomorrow. Hopefully, you can get some sleep.
We'll see. All right. Take care, guys.
Goodbye.
Yeah.